speeches in one day yesterday. He's pretty good at that, and he continues his push for health care reform. Yesterday's Medicine Show tour made stops at General Motors plant at the AFL-CIO convention. For a closer look at just what the president has been saying and how he's saying it, I'm joined by Greg Jacob. He's the former Solicitor of Labor under President George W. Bush and a partner at Winston & Strawn. And Kevin Daly is the founder of Communispond, a company that specializes in executive speeches. Good morning, gentlemen. Good to see you guys.
Good morning, Alexis.
Good morning, Alexis. It's good to be on.
Greg, great to have you on. Let's talk about the president yesterday. He goes and he speaks to one of the largest labor federations. This on the heels of a decision to stand up for labor in a negotiation with China just this past weekend. What was he hoping to accomplish?
Well, he was trying to really communicate to labor just how much in its camp he is, and he really effectively did that. He went on a long riff about union organizing, the end of which he said, "Arm in arm, we are going to get this done." And that was following on the heels of Secretary of Labor Hilda Solis's speech to them just on Monday, in which she referred to outgoing president of the AFL-CIO, John Sweeney, as our president, and said that she was humbled to be the AFL-CIO's humble servant. That's shockingly partisan language, but he really wanted to communicate that he is with labor, and he's done that both on a policy level and in the nature of his speech.
Kevin, you are an expert in speeches and body language. He looked so different yesterday compared to when he stood there in front of Wall Street on Monday. Why such a big disparity? What does this say about him?
Well, that's an interesting question. Certainly in front of Wall Street, he was more contained. He was holding back a little bit. He seemed, if you could ever say this about Barack Obama, less sure of himself. With the AFL-CIO, my goodness, he was a happy warrior. He loved that. Two purposes, solidarity with labor and the health plan. Bam! And he went right out there and did his job.
Is he overexposed?
Well, he gives so many talks, it's hard to imagine that he can be thoroughly conversant with the material. I don't mean the ideas, he knows that. But he has to make those come alive, and that's difficult when you're reading a teleprompter and just going through the motions so many times. Twice a week, 3 times a week. Wow, if you're president, you have other things as well.
Yeah, I would expect that the president of the United States should be in meetings, should be negotiating healthcare reform behind closed doors, Greg. And yet, I agree, he gives great speeches, but at some point, they're so watered down, they're so diluted right now, that is the message really resonating with the American people?
No, I don't think that he is managing to get through a clear communication of anything beyond these very broad, airy-fairy ideas about what he wants to achieve. But people want to hear actual details, those things that should be taking place in the meeting rooms, not just saying that he's in favor of health reform or in favor of the so-called Employee Free Choice Act, which he said yesterday, which would abolish the secret ballot in union elections. They want to hear the actual details and the real impact that it's going to have, and he clearly isn't spending his time working those out.
You know, Greg, obviously one of the hot-button issues is the Employee Free Choice Act. You talked a little bit about that yesterday. First of all, what is the Employee Free Choice Act, and what are the real concerns surrounding this?
Sure. The so-called Employee Free Choice Act, which is probably one of the most misnamed pieces of legislation that Capitol Hill has produced, would do 3 main things. First, it would effectively abolish the secret ballot for determining union elections for union organizing. Second, it would allow government bureaucrats, government arbitrators to be appointed to essentially impose wage payment and pension terms on employers when they can't get to an agreement with the union. So it would really strong-arm employers into coming to the table and giving up a lot to unions and potentially agreeing to bad things and then having government bureaucrats force things down their throats. And finally, very one-sided increases in penalties on employers for violating any of the laws of the National Labor Relations Act without imposing any increases for violations by unions. So it's a very one-sided giveaway to unions to essentially help them organize. Unions saw a slight uptick in union organizing last year, but as a general matter, they only represent about 7.5% of the private sector right now. They're very concerned about this drop in overall unionization rates, and this legislation is a huge giveaway to help them organize the workforce without having to really listen to what workers really want and what is going to benefit them.
Kevin, what advice would you give him right now? What does he need to do?
Well, I just heard Greg, and Greg says more detail, and it's always good, more detail, but the key thing he's selling now is a single idea as far as the health plan is concerned, which is make it better so that it covers 100% of people. And I think what he has to do is narrow that a little bit and show a total commitment to that one idea, because probably America will buy it from a man they trust. And they seem to trust him. I know it's back and forth and waning, but they seem to trust him. But no scattergun, centralized, concise, one idea.
Would he be better served if he rolled up his sleeves and he did that to the American people, as opposed to, standing up there in the suit when you're serious and you're matter of fact, but you're going around the surface, you're not inside the details?
Well, for example, he was all buttoned up with the Wall Street group. Here he had a shirt on. He felt much freer. What we want to see is the character of the man. I mean, Emerson had this great quote. He said, "What you are thunders so that I cannot hear what you say." And that's what Obama has to do. And I think his advisors tell him, hang back a little bit, play more cool. And cool does not really work in this world. And warm does. And I think that's what he has to do. He has to show conviction as to the rightness of the idea at this time for these people.
Excellent advice. Kevin, thank you very much. I'm inspired. All right, Kevin and Greg, thank you guys.